Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo and hello everybody. Welcome to another awesome episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I'm your host, Mike, this week, every week, and I'm glad you're here, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on podcast. It is great to have you, and we are going to have some fun this week. I don't know if you guys know this, but there are these cool things called books. And when I was a kid, in fact, I was just talking to my guest about this. I used to read the baseball encyclopedia. Before Baseball Reference was this online treasure trove of baseball statistics. You learned about all of these great things from books. You couldn't look online and just look up anything you wanted to look up. And so we had books. And what I've loved over the last few years, it feels like there's a resurgence in the printed word for our hobby. There are a lot of great collectors out there that are doing a lot of research and homework and giving us this information that they're finding in book form. And for old fogies like me, that's a great way to digest information. And I like looking up on websites just as much as the next guy. I use Baseball Reference all the time, sometimes multiple times a day. But back in the day, I would memorize on the baseball encyclopedia who were the top 10 guys in home run career or top 10 seasons, batting averages, RBIs, all the different statistics, wins and losses on pitching and strikeouts, and all the different things. I learned all that through reading. And there has been a resurgence. I've done a number of interviews with different authors of people doing baseball and baseball card related books. And today is no different. I'm going to introduce you guys to a guy that you may not know, a person who has written a great book on baseball cards, but we're going to hear his story first. So let me bring him on, and it's Todd Marcum. Todd, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mike.
So have you listened to the show for a while? How did you find me? I can't remember the backstory. So
I am a podcast enthusiast. I try to walk several miles every morning. I live near the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia, and I usually get in about 3 to 4 miles every morning. So I'm always listening to podcasts, and baseball cards are one of my favorite things. So of course, I just typed in baseball cards, and the Golden Age. Okay, this sounds like something that I can get into because I'm primarily a collector of the older cards, and so yeah, I've been listening for a while. I've enjoyed it very much.
Well, thank you, and I love it when listeners turn into guests. You know, it's one of those. It feels like a full circle thing, and I always look at it like without the podcast, you and I would never meet.
Absolutely.
I would never probably find your book otherwise, but I remember you reached out a while back through email and or maybe even Instagram somewhere, and we connected, and here we are doing a podcast episode. So I love that circle of the hobby tends to fill itself in. And
yeah,
so you've been collecting for a little bit, right? Tell me your hobby story a little bit.
Well, I mean, my first pack of cards that I opened that I remember was 1970 tops, and then I collected in earnest starting in 1971 actually, and I've collected ever since. I never had a time that I didn't collect. I had a time where my resources were scarcer, and I just had to settle for whatever I could get at the local corner store. But yeah, I've collected for years. Then in the late 80s, mid 80s to late 80s, I actually owned a store and did promotions throughout the Southeast. And that kind of opened up my collecting options. It was at a time where it wasn't uncommon for a small stack of T206s to walk into the shop. Not every day, but maybe once a month, something like that. I've always been interested in the Hall of Famers. And so I started saying, I'm going to try to get one card from every contemporaneous Hall of Famer. That your collecting interests morph over time. It's just a natural thing. But it just so happened that the T206s were where I started, where I had most of the Hall of Famers in that era. That's where they tended to come. So I looked and I said, you got a really decent start to a set here. You should maybe just build on it. And of course I said, well, okay, but I'm just going to get one pose of each player, because some of these players have 4 poses. They call it the monster for a reason. It gets hold of you once you get started. So, I spent several years working on what is maybe very slightly better than a binder set of T206s, but I got to 520, and I love the stories. I guess you'd call me a bottom feeder collector. I tend to do what I'd call buys of opportunity, where I find a lot of cards that just seem like good values, and I say, hey, I've never thought about doing 1941 play balls, but here I can get 30 all at once, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. So that's what I'm going to do. And then the next thing I know, I'm off to the races. The set completion appeals to me, so I will usually fill out the set, and then I'll go on to the other the next project. And usually once again, it's something that I get a good buy on a lot of the cards, and then I just fill out from there. And of course, I've worked on the top sets. I got back to my birth year, and then I've done a little bit since then as well. So, but yeah, it's an incredible hobby. I sold my shop right before the '95 baseball strike, actually, but I never did quit enjoying the hobby and enjoying the process. And there's so many friends that I've made, so many contacts I've made, and business contacts that I've made, that would have never happened if it wasn't for those little pieces of cardboard.
It's crazy, isn't it, how it does that? You mentioned how you've morphed as a collector. I call it what collectors evolve over time, what you like, what you don't like. And it's not that I don't like the other cards that I used to collect anymore. It's that I found something else that piqued my interest to some degree higher. What would you say, Todd, it contributes, if you were to say, okay, what contributes to someone's morphing? What do you think does that?
I think it's different things in different life situations. I used to buy boxes and boxes and boxes of cards back in the early 80s. And my mother-in-law came to live with us. So my big room that I was always keeping my baseball cards in suddenly became my mother-in-law's room. So I had to find a way to define what I was collecting, which was and she was a delight for a few years. I'm glad she was with us, but I no longer volume was my enemy at that point. So I actually started saying, okay, these are the things I'm going to do. I've always had an interest in pre-war, but I also at that time I started collecting what they call the bookend serial numbers of the new cards, the like 1 of 100 or 99 of 99, because you could only, getting one of those was an accomplishment out of the newer cards versus getting a set or 2 boxes or whatever. But I just have always found the older players fascinating. When I was a boy, there was a set that came out in, I think it's 1977, that photographer named Jack Wallen did. It was a 200 card set that you got the cards and you got an address list with them. And all the players had agreed to sign any autograph requests that came from that, with that card in it. And I got autographs from DiMaggio and Greenberg and just tons of players. And some of them were like George Yule. They weren't the great players, but they were players that would take time to write you back. And, they'd answer your questions if you ask them a question. And it was just a terrific experience. And I actually got to meet Jack Wallen. I never met him, but I got to talk to him on the phone quite extensively. And he was he is a very interesting. He was a photographer for Donruss, and very interesting guy. and was able to fill out my set. I don't believe there's anyone living still from that set, but I was able to fill out that set from Jack's remaining stock, which was pretty great.
Yeah, it's fascinating the innocence that we all hearken back to of what the hobby used to be and what it, how the world was just different, right, than it is today. So do you collect now? Like, what do you, how current are your sets, for example? Like, how far up do you go?
My sets are pretty current, probably to 23, 24. I at one point looked at them though and said, you're really not appreciating them anymore. Is it even worth the space, much less the money? But I mean, the top sets, that kind of made sense. At some point sooner than later, just for the space, I'll probably consolidate my top sets from 1980 up or something like that, which won't be a lot of money, but it will be a lot of space.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. What was the transition from hobby guy to, I think I'm going to write a book or two about the hobby?
Actually, in 2008, 2009, I owned an advertising agency, and the economy had gone south. It was just terrible. I would spend my days banging my head against the wall, knocking on doors, trying to find work that just simply wasn't there. People would say, we don't have any, not only do we not have anything for you, we barely have anything for ourselves. So finally, I just said, well, I need to do something positive. So I started learning to program websites. I'm still not a great programmer, but I learned the basics. But during that time, I said, gosh, you got to have something that you can put into this website to have content. And that was when I was collecting the 41 play balls. So I started by doing a scan of each of the photos and writing a little bio of each of the cards of the players that were on the cards. And a couple of years later, I was looking at it, after I had semi-retired, I was looking at it and I said, there's a lot of content here. It's pretty good content. You probably have a book here. And so then I filled it out. I had also done the 41 double plays, and it just all came together. I spent my career as a copywriter, an advertising copywriter, so writing comes naturally to me, and I enjoy expressing myself. So it was just a part of the adventure. There are certain sets, and I know you do with your greatest players set. I call them relationship sets. They're sets that you aren't just collecting numbers. You aren't just collecting cards. You're not just filling out things. You actually have a relationship with that set. You have feelings. You learn who the players are, and you learn things about the players. And all the 41 sets became relationship sets with me, and that just really paved the way to make a book that worked.
Well, the book you wrote is about 1941, and we're going to go through some slides here in a second. So if you're listening on podcast, we'll do our best to describe them. If you can, get to YouTube and go watch it, because you'll want to see these slides. But I don't, to me, the thing that bothers me most about the current hobby is it feels like, and I hope I'm wrong, that a lot of people collecting today are collecting for the money and not for the nostalgia, the history. I want to collect 1941 cards because to me, it's probably the greatest year of baseball ever, in terms of what was going on in the sport, what was going on in the world. When you combine it all together, there was this palpable tension in the world of World War II, starting up in Europe and America. Are we going to be involved? Are we not going to be involved? And, and there's this amazing summer of baseball that happens. And it obviously Ted Williams, right? Everybody knows 406. Everybody knows 56, right? The hitting streak for DiMaggio. And so, but that's not all that happened, right? There was just so much more. In the sets, there happened to be 3 great sets, right? You mentioned play ball and double play, and then you also had the Gaudies, right? In 41.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and the multicolors of those and all the stuff that goes with that. So the fact that you chose 1941 to focus this book on, I think is awesome, by the way. So
I appreciate that.
What made 41 such a compelling thing for you, besides you were you just happen to have a lot of content. There had to be more than just that.
There was. I mean, it's an interesting year, and it's the last time baseball cards would be made until the late 40s, of course. So if you have interest, unless you count something like the Wheaties or whatever, this is your last gasp at grabbing a card of a lot of these players from this era. That made it interesting. And I think it's interesting. This is and we'll talk about it a little later. This is the time of the resurgence of the Dodgers. Pete Reiser was someone that I got introduced to a long time ago, and he was just one of those players. Actually, I used to play APBA a lot, and he was one of those guys that you could depend on. He had a great 1941 card. I played the All-Time Greats series, and it was a compelling year. You're coming off the Reds, that was my boyhood team. The Reds were a very good. The Reds still had a competitive team, but were just coming off their first World Series win since 1919. So there was a lot of things to recommend that year, and it was just terrific. And you're in a point where it's the last year where you have pretty much a full strength major league until until the late the mid 40s, maybe you could argue even the late 40s.
Well, awesome. I want to get in. You sent me a slide deck that I want to share with everybody, and put my glasses on so I can see. And I'm going to put this on the screen, and you and I can talk over the slides. But this is the name of your book. It's called Baseball Cards at the Edge of War, 1941, The Games, the Gum, and the Glory. Brilliant title. You've got a picture of Joe DiMaggio in a Yankees hat and Joe DiMaggio in a U.S. Army helmet. He was in the Army, right? I do believe.
Oh yeah.
So there's what the book looks like. So, and I named the title for you guys on podcast. If you want to go find it on Amazon, can you get a digital copy too, Todd? Is that right?
You can, and it's interesting because most books these days sell best digitally, but because every card in the 1941 set is pictured in full color in this book, it really does make the print copy a little bit more special as far as being able to actually, see the card while you're talking about the player. Every player has a bio, and every player has a brief bio in it. So.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the reference that a hand copy can bring. I want to be able to grab it off my bookshelf, so to speak, and take a look at it if I have a question about something. But as we go through these slides here, there's you. Okay, look at you.
Yeah, that's all of me. Yeah.
A little bit of your history, and then let's see. Why is this not going to the next slide? There we go. So let's talk about 1941. What was going on in America that was unique in this time period?
Well, I mean, of course, the war, which was then the war overseas, was really had a big effect on the American economy because of this was the first time unemployment hit single digits in more than a decade, mainly because we were issuing arms that we were then selling to the Allies to fight the war. But culturally, it was an interesting year. I mean, this was the first year Dumbo premiered, which everybody has a Dumbo story or a Dumbo memory from their childhood. Wonder Woman and Captain America appeared on the newsstands for the first time. NBC and CBS basically developed at this time. The National Art Gallery opened, and there were still problems with America. There were issues. There were tensions. There were probably more racism in a time when it wasn't really widely acknowledged than there is today. But up until December 7th, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, life in America looked completely normal, and it looked more normal than it had in years. And part of that normal was just a wonderful baseball season.
For sure. Let's see. I'm gonna have to figure this out. There we go. 1941, 56, right? I mean,
right. Yeah. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is the Yankees really stumbled out of the gate at the beginning of the season. They they were under 500, and they had just undergone this shellacking by the White Sox. They lost 13-1, but DiMaggio got a single in that game, and he had also started slowly. And that was the first game, and he just kept hitting after that. He collected hit after hit after hit. When he got to about game 20 of consecutive game hits, it became a conversation in the local papers and in the New York media. When he broke the team record, which I think was something like 29, people really started to notice. And then it became this mania where because Joe DiMaggio had established himself as a star on the West Coast and was also a star on the East Coast with the Yankees as cornerstone of the next dynasty, it was a national phenomenon. And people would actually come up on the streets and say, "Hey, how did Joe do today? Did Joe get a hit? How'd Joe do?" And it was just an incredible mania for a short period of time. The interesting thing about, DiMaggio his hitting streak was only stopped by just some superhuman defensive efforts. Especially King Keltner made 2 just incredible stops in the 56th game. And there are several funny things about it. One is if he had had a 57th game, Heinz 57 was going to sign him up to be their spokesperson.
Yep, I heard that story before.
Yeah. But
he went on to hit in 17 or 18, I can't remember the number, straight games after that. Again, he started another streak, and he hit in 75 out of 76 games or something crazy. Somebody will correct me in the comments for sure. I'm doing this off the cuff. I don't remember, but I know he had some length of time after that he kept it going beyond that. And the card you have pictured here is great. It's the 1941 play ball.
Right.
That is my number one target in a couple of weeks when I go to the National Card Show in Chicago. So I'm on the hunt for that card right there. Maybe not in that great a shape, the one you have pictured here, but definitely that card is number one on my list.
Oh, that is truly one of the absolute classics of the era. It really is. I always wondered if DiMaggio, if DiMaggio had a streak of 75 games instead of 56 games, how would have players reacted? Because that pressure really builds as you get closer to the 56. Rose is has come the closest at 44. But it was just such an outlier number. It's just the 56 is crazy, but when you think about a 70+ game hitting streak, it's amazing.
Well, 56 to me is an unbeatable number. I don't possibly see how a player, obviously it could happen. To me, it feels so unreachable in today's game that I think he's going to be okay for a while in terms of holding the record. But yeah, great card. Does he have a 41 double play, DiMaggio?
He does. He has a double play with I think it's Charlie Keller.
Okay.
I recently upgraded this one. It looks better in the slab than if you really look at it. You can see a couple of little creases, but the corners are nice. The photos are great. But yeah, he does. Actually,
let's see yours. Go ahead and show me yours real quick, and then I'll put us back to the slides. The double play. Nice.
Yeah, for a 1.5, it presents real well.
I love it.
The interesting thing about the play ball was the only set ever that had all three, the only contemporaneous set that had all three of the DiMaggio brothers. So, right. You can get Vince and you can get Dom and you can get Jeff.
Gotcha. Let's move on to the next slide, which, if you're going to talk about DiMaggio in 41, you have to talk about Ted Williams in 1941, which to me, Ted Williams not winning the MVP is a travesty from 1941. DiMaggio won it. It's hard. It's 1A, 1B, right? But
right.
To me, Williams had such a much better season. If you really put them side by side, it's not even close. As good as DiMaggio was, Williams was so much better. And that 41 play ball card that you have pictured here is amazing. Talk about Ted Williams a little bit.
Oh gosh, I mean, Ted Williams. One of the memories that I have of Ted Williams, and he lived up till fairly recently, is that man truly loved hitting like nobody else. He had concepts on how you would hit that were decades ahead of his time, decades and decades ahead of his time. I read one time that he was talking around to somebody about how you hit, and he said, during the early part of the ball of the game, I like to hit on the top part of the ball, but on the later innings, you should hit more toward the bottom part of the ball. And the guy was just amazed. He said, I can't even see like that. Great American hero in his own way. He had an incredible war story. And I think it's kind of neat that, he's one of the very few athletes that are in two sports Hall of Fames. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Fishing Hall of Fame. And Florida, a lot of Florida's development coincided with Ted Williams's passion for sports and the sports that he had down there. But yeah, he had an amazing year. I'm not going to get this quite right, but during DiMaggio's hitting streak, he hit something like 404 or 405, and during the same time, Ted Williams hit something like 413, 414. Under today's rules, Williams's batting average would actually been 411 because at the time they counted sacrifice flies against you.
Right. Yeah. It's funny to me that baseball hasn't gone back and adjusted all of that. I guess it's hard to say for sure. Would you have perfect records to be able to make it as accurate as you'd want it to be? But I don't know. That's pretty fascinating about the sacrifice fly thing. I don't know that I knew that, honestly.
Well, it's such a matter of conjecture anyway, and there's nothing to apologize. I think Williams went into the last game last doubleheader of the season with a 399.55 average. So it rounded to 400, and his manager, who was Joe Cronin, said, "You want to sit out today?" He said, you can just have the 400. Williams was 22 years old at the time, and he thought he was going to do this year in and out. And he said, no, I want to earn it. So he went out there and, he went 4 for 6 that day before they pulled him. And he had no idea. No one had no idea that was the last 400 season we'd have,
Yeah, that was a long time ago. And nobody had done it since Harry Heilman, I think, before him. So yeah, it's not like that happens often. And that's that 406 number is something else that's all baseball fans know. And that's, I hope, to encourage people, to get your book and learn about this history. It's so fascinating. I want people to care about the game the way I would hope we'd want to, but then you got them bums, the Brooklyn Dodgers, 1941. Tell us about them.
Right. They were, the Dodgers had been a pretty feudal franchise. I mean, we think of them since they moved to LA, they've been a consistently winning franchise. Even before in Brooklyn, they were a good winning team that had many great players. But, coming into the 41 season, they hadn't been to the World Series since 1920, and they were right on the verge of financial ruin and total collapse. They hired MacPhail to be the general manager, and he brought in Leo DeRocher, and then they began engineering trades. By the way, MacPhail and DeRocher absolutely hated each other.
They despised each other. Yes.
Yeah. But but they won over 100 games. They were able to. They did it mostly by keen acquisitions. I think all 9 of their starters had started their careers with other organizations, and maybe 5 of their starting pitchers had started with other organizations. But, to me, one of the interesting things about it is this team in its own way has a real claim on history, even though they would lose the World Series to the Yankees. MacPhail got drafted into the Army. And so he recommended his replacement, who turned out to be Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey signs Jackie Robinson. And who knows how long we would have had to have waited without all of that going on. But a great team, and an interesting team in that it went from being unsuccessful to bumping into a pretty successful, an incredibly successful franchise.
Yeah, they are, they started this was the first of them becoming the Dodgers that we know today. And
absolutely,
there's a great card of Pee Wee Reese's rookie is 41 play ball.
it is.
So that's another card that's out there that is great from 1941.
Yeah, one of the things about Reese that I found kind of interesting as I was studying up on this is that he was in the Red Sox organization, and Joe Cronin was the manager, shortstop manager of the Red Sox, player manager, and he really didn't want the competition, and he's the one that kind of allowed the trade for Reese to go to the Dodgers, which was one of the things that moved him along.
That's awesome. All right, now we're you got a slide of Satchel Paige here in the Kansas City Monarchs. Tell me about that.
Right. Well, as baseball fans, we tend to learn most quickly about the major leagues, but the Negro Leagues had a great season that year. Satchel Paige bounced back from had a sore arm for about 3 years to lead the Monarchs to their series. There were two leagues at that time. There was an Eastern League and a Western League, and they almost never played, but you would have about 40 organized games a year where where the professional teams would play the other professional teams, and then the balance was the team playing a local team or a team of local celebrities or whatever. That's what really made the money for the Negro Leagues work. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is during their East-West All-Star game, they drew 50,000 people to Kaminsky Field, to Kaminsky Park in Chicago. Yeah. It drew 50,000 people, which is an incredible crowd for that, given the context of that time. The other thing I thought was interesting is the MVP of that game was Roy Campanella. He was 20 years old at that time and had already been a professional player for 4 years.
Wow.
It was, it's the Negro League history is terrific. It would have been wonderful to have the East-West play in a championship, but they didn't play in a championship that year. And it would have been, one can only wonder what would have happened if they would have played against the major league teams.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, obviously you and I can't go back and change history, but we would all have loved to see integrated baseball way sooner than it happened. But Campy ended up, 3 MVPs, right? Hall of Famer, no question. But we can do the what could have been on a lot of fronts in baseball. You can always do the man if only, right? And the reality is, even Williams, Musial, the time they lost to the service, and what their career stats would have looked like, and how much greater would they be? They're both great players, but you just think about all of that, and you kind of go, it is what it is, I guess.
Sure.
In 1941, you had baseball being played all over the world. Even we think of baseball as a global sport today, but it was certainly before the war too. Tell us about that.
Oh, absolutely. The reason that you don't have any Negro League stats for Josh Gibson in 1941 is he had been poached by Mexico, and he played most of 1941 for the Mexican owners. And those same Mexican owners would come after big leaguers just a couple of years later. Japan had played organized baseball since the 20s and had a fairly organized big league then. They lost dozens of players to the war effort. There were Cuba, Venezuela. There was good quality baseball being played all over the hemisphere, really. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the precursor to the World Baseball Classic was played for the first time a couple of years before in England. Of course, there was no baseball being played in Europe at that time, but it was a global sport, even though we don't think of it as a global sport until you get up into the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
Right. All right. 3 major sets in 1941. You've got the double play, the Gaudies, and the play ball. Do you have a favorite?
I don't see how you can not make the play ball your favorite. It just had so much going for it. It's just such a beautiful set in its own way. A lot of them are from the the 1940 play ball cards were black and white, and then they colorized them for the 41 set. Many of the players are that way. But yeah, I mean, that is classic. The style speaks to the era. They have comprehensive biographies on the back. The other two sets were blank back. But yeah, that's got to be my favorite.
It's funny because I like the 40 play ball better than the 41. It feels more to the time, black and white photography. It's the actual photograph, not a colorized version of it. It's got all the all-time greats as part of the set, whereas 41 play ball is more all the current players, right? It didn't have any old guys in it, it didn't have Walter Johnson in it. And I don't know. If I had to choose, I'd choose 40 play ball over 41, but I love them both. Don't get me wrong. I like the 40 play ball better. So I might be in the minority there.
You'll appreciate this. One of the things about baseball cards that I think is kind of unforgiving is you remember your mistakes more quickly than you remember your good moves.
Yeah.
Back in the early 80s, I was on the hunt for a Joe Jackson card, and I ended up getting a 1940 double play, which was fine. But I actually was choosing between it and one of the caramel cards with him with the A's. And they were essentially priced about the same at the time. The card the rookie card I was looking at had a little misprint on it, and I chose not to do it. But it would have been worth really big money now. But I still have the 40 Joe Jackson, and it's a great part of my collection. It's one of my favorites.
I have all the 40 play ball Hall of Famers slabbed, but I do not have the Jackson, and that is a card I would love to add. It's gotten crazy expensive because it's pretty much the most attainable of all the Joe Jackson cards. And it's not even a playing days card of him, but I do like the double plays as much as, and truly I like the Goudies. I don't own any Goudies. I do have a couple of the double plays. I like the double plays just because you do kind of get 2 for 1, right? You get, and the pairings all seem to make sense. Who they put together.
I think they're all teammates actually. So yeah. They would, yeah.
And, like you're showing here, the Cronin, Jimmy Fox double play, which is, you got 2 Hall of Famers for 1 card. That seems pretty great.
Right.
The one Gowdy card I really want is the Mel Ott from 41, because it's considered by Mike Payne as one of the 300 great cards of the 20th century. So it's on that checklist of mine, one of my favorite projects. And I used to see them pretty often. Now I don't see them ever. Like, I don't know where they all went, if they've all been buried in collections now, but it's hard to find them now.
Yeah. I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but I can go to a major show and somebody there will have a stack of play balls and somebody there will have a stack of double plays, but you very seldom see quantity of that Gowdy set. It was not a great set in a lot of ways, but it's a challenge for a collector.
Was it regionally released or nationwide released? Do you know?
Well, I think it was just at a point where the company was on its last legs, and that was what it did. I was just able to finish my set. There are some beaters in that set. You don't get me wrong, but I was just able to finish that set. So I actually have all 3 of the 41 sets now. So that was a fun one to finish up. I'll maybe eventually upgrade some of them, but I don't know. Cards of that era. I don't want one with a mustache or glasses drawn on it or anything, but honest wear, the fact that it's been appreciated, that's okay by me. I like that.
I'm with you. I like your attitude about that. So tell me what you know about the double play set.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly through the individual sets. Of course, all 3 sets. You'll find people who will argue with you on this, but to my mind, this was the only year that you had 3 sets that were produced nationally, and they all had chewing gum, or they all had bubble gum in them. So to my mind, that was the only time that would happen until 1981 that you get three sets that you could choose to collect. Wellington Kramer, he started his company just a couple of years before, and this was the double plays were really the deepest baseball offering that they ever had. His company was successful for a long time. you may see like the monster cards that came out in the 60s, and he continued to make cards, but he actually testified to in one of the early cases against Topps, saying that Topps had effectively shut his company out of the baseball business, and that's what kids wanted.
They had a monopoly for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But that's business. Interesting guy.
All
Probably my favorite guy that I learned about was Warren Bowman. You don't think about it, but being a chewing gum salesman was a perfectly viable career option in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Like being a car salesman now or something like that. Warren Bowman, he just had so little success early on. He ran barges in Mexico, sold cars in Los Angeles, roasted coffee. And the one thing, and he was an entrepreneur who was bankrupt and divorced by the time he was 22. There were so many things that would have really defeated the average guy. And he was on his way to Detroit to become an auto worker. And he ran into a gum salesman. He decided to give it a try. And he started a company. He ended up, first of all, working as a salesman. He had a great flair for making cards and doing things promotionally that would work. And in the 1930s, he became owner of a gum factory, and it was called Bloney Gum, and their big claim to fame was that you could get 3 big bites for a penny. Well, in the Depression, the idea that you could get 3 bites of gum instead of 1 bite of gum was a pretty good selling point. So he was very successful for a lot of years. Just a fascinating guy. He had a divorce issue that his wife said that he had promised her half the company. But you talk about somebody who's got a legacy. The Play Ball, this was the last year that they issued under Play Ball, but they rebranded in the late 1940s under the name Bowman. And the Bowman cards were some of the main cards during the early 50s until they sold out to Topps in 55, 56.
Right.
I think it's cool that, this is the card that made the Mickey Mantle rookie. This is the card that made the True Willie Mays rookie. And you still have the Bowman cards I opened a box of Bowman cards that my son got me just recently for Father's Day. And how cool is it that Bowman is named after this Bowman? The legacy is really strong.
I want to have some Moynihan. I want to start my own card company and call them, and then my name. No, I'm just kidding. That would
I'll be a customer.
Then you got Gowdy.
Yeah. Of course, Gowdy really was one of the most legendary of all the gum companies, but they really went out with a whimper instead of a bang. Their set was just terrible quality throughout. I think it's kind of interesting having the different color backgrounds, and I'll never get a master set with all the different color backgrounds, but it's quite a challenge because, like I said, you don't find a lot of them.
Right.
They only had 2 Hall of Famers in the set. That was Hubble and Ott. The place that, and they did continue to issue cards after the war, but they never did another baseball set. But certainly the legacy of Gowdy and the company is just amazing. Enos Gowdy, who's pictured there, was the founder, and the Wrigleys of the Wrigley chewing gum said that he was the penny gum king of America, which is quite a tribute.
For sure. All right. You talk about the 3 sets. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, between the 3 sets, and just briefly, they had the vast majority of players who appeared in the majors in 1941. A pretty good rookie card class. If somebody would have included Stan Musial, it would have been great, but a pretty good rookie card class nonetheless. And all 3 of the sets were issued with gum. One of the interesting things, Fleer didn't issue a set in 41, but they have a claim to it. The scientists who developed bubble gum did not patent it. And because of that, different companies made bubble gum, and there was never a question of whether or not it violated the intellectual property because it wasn't patented. And the reason it was pink is because that was the color dye they had in the Fleer factory when the guy who was an accountant invented bubble gum.
Yeah, you got rookies of Reese, Boudreaux, Rizzuto, my Slaughter. And how many players appeared in all three sets? Do you know that?
Off the top of my head, I know it was just a handful. I'd say maybe like three, and I think they were all 3 or 4. I think Chase did. I think the Giants did because it was the Gowdy set was very New York centric.
Yeah.
But it was not. But very few appeared in all three, and really most appeared in one or the other, but not. But but very few were in all three sets.
Cool. Obviously, the big story of 1941 happens in December when Pearl Harbor is attacked, and we are drawn into World War II officially. And talk about how that affected Major League Baseball and some of these players.
Well, I mean, it really impacted a great number of careers. We had more than 500 former, current, or future major league players would serve in some capacity, and it helped some players, and it hurt other players. Some players were able to get an extra bite of the apple because their career was extended a little bit because the best players were very often drafted. Some others may have suffered through injuries, post-traumatic syndrome, or just their skills atrophied. I mean, a lot of these guys went in when their best playing days would have been, they were in their best playing days, and they came back and there was a whole crew of younger guys and they just were unable to make it. They were unable to make it back. We lost 2 former major leaguers, which was Harry O'Neill and Elmer Gideon. We had several players that were injured in such a way that they were unable to resume their career. And I think one thing that's kind of interesting before you get into specific players, and like I said, every player who appears on a card has a biography in the book, but their off seasons and post seasons were really different. There wasn't a whole lot of money in being a major leaguer at that time, and almost everybody, unless you were the very top, the DiMaggios, had to have other employment during the off season. And a lot of times after they would retire, instead of fully retiring, they would play in the minor leagues in their hometowns for a few years. And and they were great, great draws because the minor leagues were a very different thing at that time. But it looked very different. And that was the only place that a lot of these guys had ever tasted success was on the baseball field. So it made sense for them to pull that career along as long as they could.
Well, I would argue the player who benefited most from World War II is Hal Newhouser, because there's no way he wins 2 MVP awards as a pitcher back-to-back, 44, 45, if there's no war, because all these great players would have been playing and he would have been a footnote in history, truthfully.
Oh, you'll have no argument from me. He definitely did benefit.
He for sure did. I know you got a bunch of stories. We don't really have time. There's just story after story after story from all this stuff. And there's so much here. I encourage everybody to, check out the book. It is a fascinating read. It is a very easy read. And so I don't know, where can they get it, Todd, if they want to go order it?
Amazon is the best place. Do the obligatory hold the book up kind of thing. But yeah, Amazon is the easiest place. I do a few speaking engagements here and there. If anybody wants, I'll go a long way to hear myself speak, But
do you go to shows anymore or anything for cards, or how do you?
Just as a collector. And I'll usually carry around a backpack with 2 or 3 copies in it. And I always sell them if I find a dealer who's doing vintage cards and seems interested in baseball, I'll usually at least offer one to him. Sure.
Well, that is awesome, Todd. Thanks for sharing all your wealth of knowledge and just stories from 1941. It was the podcast is Golden Age of Cardboard, but I've started kind of, there's so many topics to talk about in the pre-war era, and this is the last of the pre-war era, right? And so I really appreciate you coming on and discussing it.
It's just been a delight, and having the opportunity to do this and reconnect with friends. It was so funny, Mike, when I was in the process of writing it, I had proofed it and done all my best, and then I put out a Facebook thing that said, hey, would anybody mind reading the book and giving me some ideas? I reconnected with friends that I knew through baseball cards. When you had a baseball card shop in the mid '80s, you were a minor local celebrity.
Sure.
I was at least as famous as the weatherman, because when I'd walk into a restaurant, people would say, the baseball card guy's here, the baseball cards guy's here. And that was before video games came out, and every 12-year-old in America collected baseball cards. We'll never have that time again, but it was a lot of fun. And this book has allowed me to reconnect with people that I sold cards to when they were kids.
That's awesome.
It's been a great experience, really has. I so appreciate you talking to me about it. I can talk about baseball cards all day.
Well, that makes two of us, but unfortunately people can't listen all day. So I have to mind my audience and keep it reasonable. But guys, thanks so much for watching. We got a really fun episode coming up next week, so I hope you're here for that. And go check out Todd's book, 1941. And we'll talk to you guys later. Have a great rest of your week and keep collecting.